Hi, I'm Susan Feller. I'm the curator for the traveling exhibit Stories Are Made Loop by Loop. And today we have an interview with Terri Todd from Virginia. She's one of the 9 artists. In each of these interviews, people have asked, why did I select each artist? So I'd like to give a little background. In Terry's case, I saw her work in a workshop originally during Rug Hooking Week in the midst of COVID. And I found that it was bold, simple, and timely. I thought that she took great advantage of the isolation and dealing with our tension and unknown with these bold subjects. So I'd like to hear more of Terry's story. I'm going to share the screen and we'll listen to some of your process. Terri, welcome.
Hi, Susan, and thank you for that kind introduction. As you mentioned, I'm Terri Todd, and I live in Forest, Virginia, which is not too far from the Blue Ridge Mountains. I've always been interested in art. I remember drawing characters from newspaper comic strips when I was young. Then, as an undergrad at Indiana University, I studied graphic design. After graduation, I worked in advertising. Later, as an at-home mom of young children, I searched for ways to continue creating within the context of unpredictable schedules. Over the years, I've explored needlework, quilting, folk art painting, weaving, clay, and encaustic. Through these explorations, I discovered that texture is as important to me as color in art. I was introduced to rug hooking through a kit I bought from a vendor at a quilt conference. I found pulling loops to be a satisfying process, and over the years, I would buy a new kit from time to time. What kept me coming back was the appeal of working with the soft fiber and the relaxing process. I eventually designed a few pieces of my own and found a few years ago that dyeing my own wool allowed me to immerse myself in color. So rug hooking brought it all together for me: color, texture, and process. The looped artwork here, spiraling, was the turning point in my art direction. Here, I learned to let go of perfection and welcome working through mistakes. I was willing to take risk and work on a large scale, 4 foot by 4 foot. But most importantly, it was this piece that I discovered my artistic voice and that it could speak meaningfully at a deeper level to others. While following stay-at-home protocols during the pandemic, I was going through old sketchbooks, hoping to find inspiration for a project. I came across a sheet of doodles that I drew over a decade ago during a difficult time in my life. All those years ago, I had found art to be especially cathartic as I processed emotions about life challenges like depression and divorce. I would get out a piece of paper from the printer, grab a box of Crayola markers, and doodle my journey up to that point. How I was feeling about confusion, juggling life, depression, and then later finding strength and asserting boundaries. These drawings were simple, gestural, and boldly colored. In the context of the pandemic, it occurred to me that these images created in my past were not just my personal story, but they were relatable on a broader scale to many people. Instead of keeping them hidden, it was time for them to speak. So I selected the image that best seemed to reflect feelings regarding the pandemic, politics, and life in 2020. With a desire to create a strong connection with the viewer, I made some intentional creative decisions here. First, the medium. It was important that this work be fiber. Cloth is relatable and approachable, especially looped wool with its softness and texture. Second, the scale. Size-wise, it seemed that the closer to life size, the better that people can connect to this image. My hope was to not only get their attention, but to draw them in to really ponder the image. I enlarged it from the original 2-inch by 2-inch doodle to 4 feet by 4 feet. And third, it was also important that I maintain the integrity of the original simple gestural design and bold color. In the process of working on spiraling, I experienced the therapeutic qualities of pulling loops on an even greater level. As I held each strip of wool, letting it slip through my fingers as the hooks pulled loops to build the image on linen backing, I had time to think about how far I'd come in life since that overwhelming time when I first doodled the image, and to think about how broader present-day concerns were stressing me and others. This productive thinking time helped me to come to the conclusion that just as I had overcome challenges in the past, those present-day challenges would be worked through as well. That summer, I took additional risks and brought spiraling to my first rug hooking week at Souter Village. I was looking for feedback about whether I was on the right track technically, and I wanted to learn more. Fortunately, I was taking Susan's retreat and asked her and the retreat participants for their thoughts about spiraling. I was grateful for everyone's helpful and kind feedback, as well as their encouragement to submit it for consideration in Rug Hooking Magazine's Celebration annual publication. I did submit it, and having it accepted provided further encouragement that I was headed in the right direction and inspired me to keep going. As I mentioned, while working on spiraling, I found that the process of hooking loops provided an opportunity to process the mental health journey that I had traveled years ago and to acknowledge growth and healing. There was also a realization of the development of qualities of patience and perseverance while tackling such a large piece, as well as a sense of accomplishments as little loops gradually came together to complete the composition. Rhythmically manipulating the soft wool strips had also provided comfort during the challenging time of the pandemic. But the pandemic was not totally over yet, nor was I done creating large-scale fiber compositions. At this point, I decided to continue by creating a series of looped fiber art based on more of the doodles created that evening over 10 years ago. This next image, Imbalanced, is 6 feet by 6 feet. It is separated into 3 vertical panels. The focus of this piece is on the precarious attempt to balance our lives amid the many needs and responsibilities tugging at us, some negative, some positive, and some just there. Being separated into 3 panels creates additional tension, almost disjointed. It also helps the viewer focus separately on each panel's elements, then consider the interaction of the elements in the whole composition. How would the meaning change if there was a greater space between one panel and the other 2? How would the balance be affected if an element or 2 of the composition changed? Each piece in the series while depicting a step of a mental health journey, also offers an element of hope. Hope is a vital factor in working through life's challenges. In spiraling, hope is found in the off-white background, as opposed to the image being surrounded by a darker color. Here, in imbalanced, hope is found in the lights peeking through the translucent window of the house. I also introduced different media and techniques to the artwork in imbalanced, in addition to working with wool strips. The window of the house image is created with encaustic treated wool in front of LED lights, creating a warm glow in the composition. Exploring and noticing details is an important part of my art process. My phone is filled with photos of observations that I've made on daily walks. The shadow of a curled leaf laid on an autumn afternoon. Designs made by lines of fallen pine needles. The texture of lichen on a rusty bridge railing. A certain brilliance of blue in a blue sky, in a bright sky. I not only find beauty in those details, but in noticing, they become a part of my mental file from which I draw inspiration when creating. Then the creative process also has its own inspirations, whether through curiosity or in response to problem solving. What would happen if? I've been exploring the changes to wool when it is soaked in encaustic medium. Encaustic is a painting medium made of beeswax and resin. Pigment is often added. I wondered how the encaustic would affect fabric and discovered that encaustic medium applied to mid-range to light colored wool makes the wool translucent. Using this technique made sense for this piece as I was seeking a subtle way to draw attention to this section of hope within the design. The LED lights randomly shining through the window behind the colorful spirals helps to achieve a lighthearted bit of encouragement. As I continue the series, my vision for each subsequent design continues to evolve. And while I enjoy adding a variety of fiber art techniques in addition to the looped wool, I feel that it is important that careful consideration be given to these different techniques, assuring that their use makes sense for the imagery and contributes to the overall composition. In this piece, my current work in progress, it makes sense for the round sections to be completed with quilling. The placement of the quilled circle elements will also help to create a balance in the composition. The middle of the bed has a stack of 4 mattresses. I could have hooked those, but felt an image closer to a real mattress would strengthen the piece. In order to achieve that, I am in the process of quilting 4 pieces of wool in a pattern reminiscent of that stitched on the surface of a mattress. The element of hope is especially crucial in this piece about depression. In this artwork, there will be an almost transparent overlay covering the figure and mattresses, providing comfort like a blanket. Relevant, encouraging text will be embroidered along the bottom of the blanket overlay. There are a couple more of my doodle images in this series that I will be enlarging and creating in looped wool. I'm excited about those images because they portray a progress to strength and healing in my journey. Due to the large scale, it will take time to complete the series. In the meantime, I continue to learn and evolve with each piece. So I must allow some uncertainty for where the direction of my work is headed after the series. I do know that I will continue to explore and discover new imagery, perhaps more playful and lighthearted, as in my bluebird design here. And I have every reason to expect that looped wool will be integral to my creations. I anticipate working on a smaller and more quickly completed scale. And I have many newer doodles in my sketchbook that include spirals. I expect that bold, bright colors will still be a feature of my work. Dyeing the wool is a part of my enjoyment of the process. I also look forward to playing with a variety of fiber textures. Ultimately, I hope to continue connecting with others through my artwork.
That was really a great way to tell your story. And I appreciate all the background information that went into it. I typically take notes, and in a couple of these, and the purpose is so that people go back and look at your slides and hear your presentation on the second time around, maybe with a fresh thought to catch something. One of the things that I really liked was that you challenge us to see very special ways, like when the triptych, if they're separated, not totally on their own, but, is the tension different depending on the amount of space that they're hung at? And I think for a curator, because these pieces will be traveling to 3 different venues, it'll be very interesting also to see the entire room and the other pieces that are put, on separate walls, but near your work, and how people progress through the collection. I think that is really important. And I do turn that over to each of the galleries to do a little bit of rearranging, although I have some ideas how I want them to be complementing each other. So that will be very interesting, and to every viewer who gets to see them in person, they'll appreciate. The other thought that I wanted to make people aware of is, in your work, you challenge yourself to pull every loop perfectly. And
Yeah,
that's something that in rug hooking, and we can twist a loop just a little bit in one direction or another, and it adds to our story. And especially in yours, you're echoing some of the shapes, and then you're doing a very linear work, and all of those lines are they're emphasizing the main motifs very successfully. So I think that's something that people, when they look at the work, should be more intent in seeing. And these slides, probably, if they're able to blow them up a little bit, they'll be able to see each loop and more about what we're talking about. So I appreciate that.
I think that's also maybe part of why my process is a bit slow, because there's a lot of intentionality as I am pulling those loops.
Well, and these are large pieces, and as you said, you have several others in this overall series, which is something of a positive, progressive message. When it's done, it'll be an exhibit of its own, which will be very beneficial. But I think that's another point to be emphasized about why we work slowly, one loop at a time. Can you share a little bit more about, where you go as you're pulling your loops? And it's not automatic. We are purposeful with each of them. We're aware of them, but there's a rhythm, isn't there?
Oh, there is, and that's part of what's soothing and comforting. And at the same time, you're paying attention, but with a piece that size and thousands of loops being pulled, it gives you that opportunity for contemplation, for thinking about the meaning behind the work, as well as all kinds of other things. Certainly during the pandemic, it was interesting making the connections between when I originally created the image so many years ago, and then really getting me to think about how other people were experiencing the pandemic and what their situations and concerns might be.
Yeah. The last slide in this interview will have your contact information. And I do know that your Instagram page probably is the best one to be looking at your work. You post as you can, and you are in improving in media ways of telling your story. That was the retreat that we met at, how to
Yes.
digitally and visually tell your story. You are definitely accomplished the visual end, and I really appreciate being in this journey on the digital learning curve also. So thank you very much, Terri, for sharing your story today. We'll archive this and probably check back in a few years and see where else you've been.
Well, thank you so much, Susan. This has been an amazing opportunity and journey with this. Thank you.